Yano Kairi did everything wrong. Though he was one of the Phantom Thieves disguised as a bistro juror waiter, he hardly committed to that role, his lack of particular care for his work leading to comments of his supposed sabotage practically serving as a greeting for him. When it came to Umika or Toma, Yaodagar was easily able to send them home to juror, but even though he also resided there, it wasn't a place for Kairi to belong. There was a rift. Kairi was not like his peers. The police, utilizing Good Striker, were unified, which matched their ideological union in a desire to protect. They may not see eye to eye in every area, and they joined for different reasons, but ultimately they worked together to defend the innocent and people in need. That's not to say there's no unity in the Lupinrangers. They cross their guns under a promise that should one of them fall, the others will carry their torch to achieve their mutual goal. And yet, their finishing blow is not one of fusion, but fission, specifically that of Lupin Red. Umika and Toma accept very much who they are, but Kairi can't, or rather, won't. Growing up, Kairi deeply idolized his brother, Shori, expressing a strong desire to be just like him. Kind, strong, competent, a natural hero. Yet for everything he was, Kairi just couldn't seem to match up. When faced with his weakness, he easily saw his own failings, the lack of good in himself. Yet when others paid heed to his strengths, Kairi couldn't accept it, knowing full well the bad that lay underneath that good. He hadn't been patient waiting for his brother while he helped a little girl. He was bitter that his brother was spending their time helping someone else. And that all came back in the wake of Keiichiro, so much like his brother. So able to make Kairi's weaknesses and failings known to him by being the kind of person he wanted to be, but wasn't. Not only was Keiichiro wrong about Kairi's reasons for spending time with him, but in being able to look for and find that good, he continued to reveal the gap between him and Kairi, their natural differences. Where Keiichiro put in the work to find the original hair tie of a lost child, Kairi had instead bought a new one to pass it off as the one that was lost. The sneaky, dishonest option never even crossed Keiichiro's mind, where Kairi was quick to do things the wrong way if it meant getting the better results. Even when Kairi does something remotely good, his mindset is always hedged by his own self-perception. This especially shows itself in what Kairi does most commonly through his tendency to go against what he may have been supposed to. The Phantom Thieves were bound by a promise, one in which should any of them fall on their path to saving their loved ones, then those that remained would carry on and save all of them, so that even if one of them met their end, the ones they wanted to save would still be free. Those were their rules that would keep some distance between them, and they had no need to help each other outside of their duty as thieves. And yet, the only time Kairi followed the rule properly was in the first episode, where he was willing to put Toma and Umika in harm's way to achieve their goal. Soon after that, he would fail to abide by the spirit of the promise that was intended to give the best chances at allowing them to have all their loved ones saved. In rescuing Umika from a gangler, he forced the burden of their task on the most childish one in their group, the one least capable of pulling it off, compromising their mission far worse than had he simply let her be sacrificed. This mindset comes up time and time again, as Kairi puts himself in harm's way for the sake of others, for the sake of the promises they made. He shoots through his hand to trick Manta into leaving Toma's body, risking the mission to keep Toma alive as his original self. After hearing about Tsukasa's promise to her grandfather to come home safely, he throws himself into the fray, enacting her own dangerous plan in her place, so that she wouldn't be risking the life she made a vow to preserve. Kairi isn't anything like Shori or Keiichiro, this fact a constant failure of his, leaving him with a life that he throws to the wind, the promise he made freeing him, others able to save his brother even if he wasn't around to see it. That life that could never live up to his own standards worth tossing away to keep those he cared about from being hurt. Promises and rules, those which Kairi struggled to fulfill, serve as a core facet of the dichotomy between thieves and police present in the conflict of the show. Simply put, rules are put into place to create peace and order, upheld by police. The thieves, however, act against these rules in service of their own desires, creating discord. Both of these extremes are strongly represented in the ganglers. As criminals, they break rules purely for their own desires, creating mass chaos wherever they strike, and yet they too are bound by their rules, or to be specific, a promise. Dogranio Yabun opens the series stating that the gangler who conquers Earth will be named his successor. this promised creating a rule. But rules aren't meant to be blindly accepted, something shown in Sakuya in particular. The youngest and most green of the Patrangers, he's clumsy, awkward, and just less capable than his seniors who he deeply admires. And yet he is still Sakuya, not Keiichiro or Tsukasa. Keiichiro is obstinate, such a stickler for order and rules that he fundamentally rejects the Lupinrangers. Tsukasa, though, is kinder, able to put her trust even where it seemed foolish to do so, using the systems in place to do her best. But when on suspension, for his desire to help people in need, Sakuya broke the rules and systems in place, rushing to the assistance of his comrades. The weakest cop made the best thief in their ranks, figuratively speaking. An ideal thief does not break or challenge systems or rules arbitrarily. By trying to help people no matter what, Sakuya followed the rule most important to police, even if he had to break other systems to do so. Hilltop recognizing his drive and lending a hand before the success led to a complete turnaround of the chief's opinion, that Superior lacking in integrity bowing completely to the systems that controlled perception of the police where Sakuya had successfully challenged them. Sakuya's inability and lack of competence may be a fuel for his insecurity, often being expressed as a desire for recognition.
Sakuya senpai!
気持ちいい先輩という響き最高
But ultimately, he is accepted as himself. After Pekka afflicted Sakuya with a power that made him even more of a screw-up after he jumped in the fray, eager for recognition, Keiichiro impressed on him the need to keep trying even if there was that chance of failure, trusting him and his talent for sharpshooting. Despite his failures, Keiichiro knows Sakuya and accepts him. Sakuya able to transfer that drive into doing what he needs to do what's right. And similar to how Sakuya is a cop who is accepted as a cop despite having a bit more capability to subvert systems like a thief, in the Thieves there's a bit more heroism and desire to help others than might be expected. Toma, for instance, values integrity, occasionally being confused by Kairi's flippant tendencies, and distrusting Noel due to not knowing where his loyalties lay, until getting to know him better and learning where his integrity rested as a fellow professional. Though Toma is also a thief, he had a natural disconnect with certain others. And it's also interesting in how Toma ties to a trope common to Super Sentai. As heroes, various rangers often lend their support to children as inspirational figures. And while Keiichiro and Sakuya give assistance to Sota, not that Tsukasa is bad with kids. The only thief to have a heroic moment like this is Toma, who helps Yuki overcome himself despite not having a particular reason to do so, even if the sneaky way he did it was much like a thief. And then there's Umika, the youngest of the Phantom Thieves. In her relative innocence, she's the first to be willing to give the police a hand through information they can use when it comes to protecting people. Yet as she grows, while she becomes a more capable thief, she still retains that natural goodness, more willing to consider both sides. Like when Noel potentially had valuable information, but only if they told him about Zamigo, which Toma was against. It's fitting that she was paired with Sakuya, as towards the end, when the thieves were being forced to reveal their identity, it was Umika and Sakuya who most wanted things to remain the same. Their peaceful lives where cops and thieves fought while they all remained friends under the blissful ignorance of their secret identities. And yet it was Umika who chose to follow through with the gangler's demands if it meant saving Noel. Though she wanted things to stay the same the most, as a thief she was willing to go against that desire in exchange for the thing that mattered the most, where Sakuya struggled with the revelation. His desire to help people, and his desire to remain friends with the juror employees now challenged as the systems in place framed them as criminals in the wrong. And that absolute stance against the thieves is a recurring sore spot, where Sakuya expresses his relief at being able to work with the thieves, their strength helpful in taking down ganglers who are too powerful for the police alone. It's admitted that the police can't openly work with those willing to subvert laws while they aim to uphold them. The extreme of this expressed by Keiichiro. Those who break the law are criminals no matter the reason. By saying such to Lupin Red, a young man already aware that he's not doing the right thing, not being able to match up to the one he looks up to, his weakness and insecurity is only driven home when shoved in his face. But he can't be a straight-laced heroic type like Shori or Keiichiro. So if the law isn't willing to see any compromise or nuance, then Kairi will take the role he's been given. That absolute drive of Keiichiro's and Kairi's insecurity created a divide in two teams that had to find a way to work together to surmount the trials ahead, leaving a job for the one who stood in the shoes of both, Takao Noel. Desiring both the Lupin collection that could save his loved one, and the peace that the Patrangers aimed to protect, Noel was a thief the police couldn't trust, and an officer whom the thieves couldn't have faith in. And yet, by continuing not just to close the gap between himself and them, but between the two teams, that blind doubt gradually became a desire to understand. The thieves taking collection pieces weakened the ganglers, making them easier to defeat so that the city could be more well protected by police, while the brute force of the police was capable of subduing ganglers and assisted the collection of pieces. Knowing the value of unity, Noel never intended to stand alone. Modifying the collection for human use, he required the support of the others even just to use his mech. Yet in doing so, he gave the others weapons to use themselves if needed. And through his efforts and desires, he revealed the ideal. Peace was needed. The thieves couldn't be the only force, even if they had the skills that could stop the ganglers. But only the thieves could get back what they had lost because the system had failed them. Because the police had been weak, Zamiko kidnapped countless people for his disguises. Because the police were unreliable, they could not be trusted, just as no one trusted Noel when he entered the scene. And yet through understanding, a better answer could be reached. In Noel's duel with Keiichiro, he finally got a hint at why the thieves fought, and out of a desire to help people, he was able to make a concession, throwing the duel. And as their desires were the same, the two teams continued to get closer. As the V that represented the thieves and the S that served the officers were both symbols that indicated Noel, they could be combined, not into verses, but into X, or cross. The teams crossed as they finally achieved unity, both aiming to help people even if it was through one side that upheld peace while the other subverted rules. In the last episode, the tendency for police to use land vehicles and the thieves to use air vehicles gradually falls apart as each side takes the hope of the other with them into the final battles. The gradual teamwork, helped by continued understanding, had come to a head in the battle against Destra, where Kairi and Keiichiro's understanding of how the other operated allowed them to even surpass Destra's future sight. Against one who had compromised on his own ideals and integrity out of adherence to his leader, those who understood each other, and were only able to understand the other because that person had remained true to themselves, came out on top, working with one who similarly continued to be himself. This episode was the first time in which Noel stole collection pieces not as Lupin X, but Patron X. Noel's true self, one who dearly wanted to achieve both, had once been rejected by those who were different, but now he was known by those who would continue to accept him for who he was, even when they learned his true nature as someone not completely human. By mixing themselves together, they achieved unity where Destra's concession was only one-sided, where the thieves understand peace, never causing more discord than they need to, while the police come to know that breaking rules can sometimes allow for people being helped who wouldn't have gotten that help otherwise. The ganglers were either trapped in their adherence to just one rule, or simply ignored it. Dogranio, growing old, sought a successor, and though he made his promise, no one challenged it. All the episodic ganglers had their plots, yet each one of them failed. Their support from Dogranio was casual, minimal. The collection piece and a gigantification from Gosh, little more, even as he set them on the difficult task of surpassing both Lupinrangers and Patrangers. His failing is echoed in concerns Kogure offered while split into his best and worst. His own failings directly causing trouble for those he needs the help of to acquire the full collection. Much like Dogranio, he was an elder pushing the young to do a difficult task. Kogure certainly has skills himself, having spent a year training the Lupinrangers for their duty, yet while his disguises are great, he's not quite as agile as he used to be. Yet he offers everything he can, even putting himself at risk if needed. Whether it's an alibi or a checkbook, he does everything in his power to help. Yet Dogranio, possessing far more power, still isn't able to accomplish what he wanted the young to do while he himself was getting on in years. But the failure isn't only his. None of the younger ganglers truly tried to match up to Dogranio, only following after him blindly. A true leader of the ganglers would have been more like Dogranio to the point of aiming to exceed him. Ambition, vision. Only he could imagine the future of the ganglers, and in that, no one else was fit to lead. No one else could match him. By only following him, they could never hope to do what even Dogranio couldn't. Destra aimed for the seat not because he wanted to, he was satisfied being Dogranio's right-hand man, but because Dogranio asked him to. Out of that devotion for his leader, he would do whatever he could, even conceding on his beliefs, working with Gosh to use collection pieces, falling to the thieves and police who stayed true to themselves. Gosh was never interested in the first place, only caring about her science and experiments, Dogranio taking her pieces away due to her failure in regards to that promise of succession. And Zamigo was the one most strongly representing the extreme of a thief. Rules, systems, laws, promises, none of that mattered to him. When Dogranio goes wild, he laughs about how he's back to his old tricks, the Elder being the only one Zamigo could respect, even though Dogranio saw potential in him as the next boss of the Ganglers. But he was never interested in anything but his desire for a fun fight, which led to him going against any rule he needed to for that desire, never challenging Dogranio or his promise like an ideal thief, only acting as an agent of chaos and destruction. Those whimsical actions rewarding only him. He got the fight of his life, and died satisfied. The one most capable of challenging Dogranio never turned his eyes to him, more interested in the young Kairi than the old Gangler. And because of that, he was the only one who got what he wanted while the suffering of others was left in his wake. The thieves would remain trapped, while Dogranio had his pieces taken from him under his nose. And without anyone to challenge him and take on his promise to exceed him, without anyone to break his rules in a way that worked to both of their benefit, Dogranio ends the series captured, the last leader of a crumbling organization, only wanting a death that would not come. Despite being in a crime group, the Ganglers suffered most not from the chaos they caused, or even disunity, but the lack of ability to challenge the rules they themselves had in place. And that is the value of a thief. While one who breaks rules without purpose only causes harm, and although rules and laws create peace, they need to be challenged and re-examined by the new generation to avoid the complacency and stagnation that trapped those Ganglers and choked them to the end. And that is the strength of Kairi. Kairi was simply too good at doing things wrong, something that brought him no end of anguish. Yet in that was a skill that few others could match. In the trial to achieve the Lupin Magnum, Noelle, Toma, and Umika failed. Their desire to save their loved one was too strong for them to shatter even an image. Their natural heroism and inclination to do the moral and right thing being at odds with the true spirit of a thief. But Kairi was different. He could go against that desire. He could be the bad guy, do the wrong thing, earning the Lupin Magnum for his ability to go against such a rule where those more heroic than him couldn't. Because that's who Kairi is. He's a screw-up, but he's the best screw-up, and the best thief. It's a quality he could not value in himself because he looked to Shori or Keiichiro, those two who were so unlike him. But as he continued to sacrifice himself, he started to pull others towards him. Recognizing his failure as a police officer to truly protect everyone he could, Keiichiro reaches out to Kairi, now known to be Lupin Red, and states that he's prepared to surrender his badge if he has to, as long as he can help Kairi, help a person in desperate need. The one who reminded him so much of a person he admired now wanted to be not like himself, not like Shori, but instead like Kairi, someone willing to go against those systems that he'd once sought to uphold, and someone who for so long wanted to be someone other than himself. Seeing himself reflected in Keiichiro, the young man who struggled to value himself pushed him away. Keiichiro is a police officer, and Kairi is a thief. And so as he goes to work as a thief, not a cop, he pushes Keiichiro to be a cop, not a thief. They are who they are, and no one else. This is expressed regularly through a simple gesture. This simple brotherly act was one done by Kairi regularly to Umika throughout the show. Umika was the youngest, and Kairi, stronger as a thief and a bit wiser, did it as a way to try and be like his brother. But when Umika and Toma chase him down, they pull out his true self. The promise they made, the rule they followed that allowed for their sacrifice, was thrown out. Kairi had been sacrificing himself to ensure no one but himself got hurt. But his feelings were matched by the others, who similarly didn't want him to hurt himself or be sacrificed. Umika and Toma just in this moment surpassed him as a thief, throwing out that promise because it no longer fit their desires, challenging that rule and subverting it as needed. And then Umika did that same gesture to him. Kairi is Kairi. Sometimes a kid, sometimes a screw-up, but far more often a good person who can't so easily see that goodness in himself. And with the end of the series, thieves fighting for what they have to as police protect order, that conflict is in itself a kind of order, one that promotes progress and understanding even if through difficulty and strife. While working together created the ideal result, Keiichiro is Keiichiro, and Kairi is Kairi, as everything should be.